I felt so badly about everything that had happened. I called in Monday and quit. When I took the job, it seemed so perfect, get paid to F and party. When I saw what she went through on Sunday, I started wondering how many other marriages got wrecked by those parties. I had already received a good offer at the firm, but had been putting off starting. After spending Sunday with Jenny, I realized that it was time to move on. That's everything I know. If you want to take my word for everything, don't look at the tape. It's going to be F up to see her like that. If you watch it, I hope it will help you see that she was set up by Megan. All I can say is that I'm sorry that Jake and I helped. I think you're crazy if you don't give her another chance. She told me she didn't want any of it to happen and wished she could take it all back. There wasn't any reason for her to lie to me, so I believe her. As he finished, I tried to figure out how I should be feeling. Do I say thank you to the man who F'd my wife? Now that I knew more behind what had happened, did it make any difference? Jenny still cheated on me, but at least now I knew it was a one-time thing and not something that she went looking for. Drunk or not, she went along with it and then compounded her betrayal by doing it again the next night. David's description of her guilt made me more sympathetic to her, but I couldn't get the image of the party out of my head. Now there was another issue. Do I watch the tape to confirm his version of the events? It would most certainly be worse than what I saw at the party, and what would it change? I honestly didn't know if I could take seeing more of her like that. I wondered exactly what I had done to deserve this. Since everything was finished the first day, I caught an earlier flight. I arrived back in town very late, so I left Danielle with Jenny and got some sleep. In the morning I called Brian. I filled him in on some of the details and asked to see him. He told me he'd have some time early in the afternoon and I could stop by. Okay, now that you know some details, you need to talk to your wife about it. I noticed that Brian often chose to call Jenny my wife or some other term of endearment rather than just saying her name. There was probably some specific reason, but I didn't get it. Now that some of the blanks are filled in, I think I'm ready to talk to her. There are still problems though. How do I know if she's being honest, even if I want to believe her? If it turns out that everything happened the way David explained it, then she certainly deserves more sympathy than I've shown her, but that doesn't excuse what she did. She still cheated on me. I doubt she would be very sympathetic if I got drunk and slept around on her. Then there's the video. Should I watch it? Those are all really important questions, John. Unfortunately, I can't answer any of them for you. All I've been trying to get you to do is take charge of your life. It's not that I think you'll feel better if you do things the way I think they should be done. I let you talk for 3 weeks to understand your feelings about right and wrong. It's you fighting your own convictions that is making you so miserable. You can't let go of Jenny because you still love her, but feel like she needs to be punished for what she did. You have to decide what you can live with and what you are willing to give up. It's not easy, but that's life. I glared at him in frustration. Thanks, that was absolutely no help whatsoever. John, all I can tell you is that if you can make your decision without looking at the video, don't watch it. There is more pain down that road and it will make things even harder for you. If you need to watch it to see for yourself how she acted, then you should watch it. In my opinion, if you need to watch it to make your decision, you've pretty much already made it anyway. I thanked him and picked up Danielle. I talked to Jenny briefly, but tried not to act suspicious. I mentioned Brian's sessions and asked if she would be interested in coming. She enthusiastically agreed, making me a little nervous about what she expected. I had tried to be more pleasant without getting her hopes up. I just wanted to get things resolved so I could move on. I made it until the day before the session without looking at the tape. It was locked in my desk, where Danny couldn't accidentally see it. Just after dinner that night, I decided I had to watch it. I asked Steve and Sharon to watch Danielle for the night. In case I couldn't handle what I saw, I didn't want her anywhere around me. I sat around my house for an hour just staring at the tape on the coffee table in my living room. Finally, I couldn't take not knowing and put it in the VCR. Megan, Jenny, David and the other stripper were already in the room talking. Jake must have distracted them while David threw up the camera on something. It might have been in a bag set up to record without being seen. They had been out dancing together and were talking about how much fun the club was. While Jake and David talked on the other side of the room, Jenny pulled Megan aside. It happened to be close to where the camera was. Although I couldn't see them, it was easy to hear the conversation. Jenny was already slurring her words. Megan, I want to do this for you, but having 2 guys in my room is something John would freak out about. I can only help you to a point and then I need to go. I'll get another room for the night and you can have all the fun you want, okay? Don't worry, Jen. Just help me tease them a little so I can get them where I want them. You can make an excuse, leave and I'll get to have a night I'll never forget. Did you see how hot they are? They're both in college and have incredible bodies. This is going to be amazing. You just trust me, I won't let them try anything with you and when I'm sure they're ready, I'll let you know that it's time to leave. Megan walked over to the other side of the room and turned on a boombox. There was some club music playing and the girls began dancing with both guys. They must have picked up where they left off at the club because the dancing was already more than a married woman should be doing. They touched and ground against each other as it went from one song to another, although I noticed David never tried to touch anywhere that would have alerted Jenny that he was planning on more than dancing. When the fourth song started, Megan moved against Jenny, chest to chest, and began moving her hips against my wife's leg. The guys took up position on the outside and slid up and down against the girls' backs. Megan started moving her hands up and down Jenny's sides. The guys stepped back and watched as Megan spun my wife around, running her hands around to her stomach. As their dance continued, Megan moved her hands up and down Jen's hips and thighs. She suddenly spun her around and pushed a knee between Jenny's thighs. I could tell it was already getting out of control as Jenny began rubbing herself back and forth across her friend's thigh. When the song ended, the girls split up and high-fived, giggling like it was no big deal. The guys got them drinks and everyone sat around for a few minutes. They danced for a few more songs, got more drinks, and then Megan said she had an idea for a party game. She wanted to put on a blindfold and guess which guy gave the better neck massage. Jenny sat away from them as David covered her eyes. He went first, working on her for about a minute before letting Jake take over. When they were finished, she said it was too hard to tell. She invited Jenny to try. While initially saying no, Jenny finally giggled and sat on the chair, waiting for the blindfold. I couldn't believe she was actually going to do that. Their motive seemed so obvious. Despite her reminding Megan that nothing was going to happen, how could she not see where this was going? This time Jake went first, followed by David. Jake started cautiously, just rubbing the base of her neck. As he moved out to her shoulders, he calmly reached in front and undid the top two buttons on her blouse. Before she could protest, he moved back to her neck. The contact of skin on skin made an immediate impact on her as her head lolled forward. That feels good. After Jake finished, David took his turn. He used many of the same tactics, plus a couple of different tricks. Neither of them had gone over the line that would have alerted Jenny to their real intentions. I noticed that they each went at least twice as long as they had with her friend. Megan pulled her out of the chair and said, "My turn." Jenny had another drink as she watched the guys take turns working on her friend's neck, shoulders, and upper back. After another couple of minutes, she bounced out of the chair saying she still wasn't sure. She pulled Jenny up and pushed her into the chair. Although Jen objected, she let herself be led. When Jake took his turn, Megan slid a chair close in front of Jenny and picked up one of her feet. When she jumped, Megan just said she knew Jenny's feet were tired from dancing and she was doing it so she could get the same treatment on her next turn. While she softly worked her hands over Jenny's foot and ankle, Jake took advantage of her distraction to undo another button. He did it quickly and it appeared Jenny didn't notice. As he worked his way down her neck and to her upper back, he pulled the shirt open as far as it would go without breaking the next button. His thumbs worked into the muscles at the base of her neck and then outward toward her shoulders, over her shirt. He took a couple of opportunities to reach into her shirt in front, but stopped. If she had been sober, I know she would have objected, but as long as he didn't do anything to startle her, the slow seduction was working. I glanced at my watch and saw that each man had taken a full 5 minutes before letting Jenny up. When she tried to stand, she was obviously unsteady on her feet. I don't know how much of it was from the alcohol and how much was because she was so turned on. When Megan sat down, she insisted Jenny pay her back and put her foot up on the chair. Jenny reluctantly sat down and began massaging her foot and ankle as David applied the blindfold. Again the guys took turns and didn't appear to do anything nearly as invasive as what they did to Jenny. I wondered if in her condition, she thought that it was her imagination that it seemed to go on longer with her and that the guys touched her more aggressively. When Megan pulled off the blindfold, she announced that she was ready to vote on the winner in the men's contest. She then said Jenny needed to do it one more time so they could vote. Jenny pulled her close and said something into her ear. It appeared like she was saying she didn't want to. Megan reassured her and they traded places. Once the blindfold was on, she picked up one of Jen's foot and started caressing higher, this time from the calf to her knee. I could tell she had stopped pretending to massage and was just softly caressing. Both hands worked at the same time and moved around, searching for sensitive areas to undermine her will. It had to be incredibly erotic for Jenny with the blindfold on. The first massage was Jake's and it had taken another step up. He ran his hands down her arms and pushed them together. Again and again he went from her neck to her arms. When he put one hand against her back, he reached his other arm across her chest to hold her in place. I could see Jenny shift in her seat as this new tactic plus Megan's touches took its toll on her. Again it went for about 5 minutes, then the men switched. David again used almost the same technique. Megan switched legs and continued trying to drive Jenny wild. Somewhere in the middle of David's turn I started seeing the signs of arousal that I knew so well. Jenny began moving her hips in her seat. I doubted she even realized it. Jenny got up and motioned Megan over by where the camera was. That was too much, Megan. I'm not comfortable with this anymore. I want you to have your fantasy, but you're going to have to do it yourself. Not only was she really sounding drunk, I didn't think she sounded as firm in her resolve to leave. Megan talked quickly, trying to keep her from leaving. When Jenny tried to protest, Megan said, "You're being silly. The blindfold makes it seem more intense than it is. They didn't do anything with you differently than me. Of course nothing is going to happen, we're just getting these guys hot so that they'd stay the night with me. You haven't done anything to be worried about. This is all just for fun, relax." I cringed and wondered how many drinks Jenny had, for her to be able to fall for such a load of crap. Megan turned and announced that David was the winner. She said Jake had one more chance to redeem himself. She wanted to try one more thing, for both men to massage her at the same time. She said she always wanted to have two guys give her a massage at the same time. I noticed that Jenny sat on the chair in front of Megan without being asked. Once the blindfold was on, the last round started. They kept it to about 3 minutes and again it was more or less respectable. Jenny rubbed Megan's feet and calves through the whole thing. Her touches were far different from what I saw Megan doing earlier. I knew this would be where they would try to break my wife's will completely. It's not that she hadn't already let things go far beyond what she should have allowed to happen, but if they could get her to go further there wouldn't be any going back. Jake started on her right, with David on her left. Megan pulled the chair a little closer. I had turned the VCR's display on and saw it was about the 5-minute mark of the massage when they made their move. Jake moved in front of her and put his fingers on her shoulders. David countered from behind by going down her back and around her sides. Jenny's breathing had become erratic and she began undulating on the seat. They kept her like that for a few minutes before Megan moved her hands. I felt sick as I watched Megan slide her face between my wife's. Jenny leaned her head back and David took the opportunity to kiss her softly. I couldn't see exactly what Megan was doing, but she moved her face around. Jake gave up on the pretense of a massage and worked his hands down. Jenny was obviously beyond rational thought. The three of them didn't change their tactics, they just kept working on her until I saw Jenny kissing David back as she grabbed the back of Megan's head with both hands to hold her in place. The men gently pulled her out of the chair and moved her to the bed. Megan didn't give her a chance to calm down. It was easy to see that David was very good at his job. As a dancer, he was able to move his hips in much the same way that Jenny used to drive me crazy. It probably wouldn't have taken much to keep Jenny in her current state, but he seemed to be elevating it to a new level. Jenny suddenly must have realized that it was Megan kissing her because she made a surprised sound and put her hands up like she was going to push her away. A shiver ran through me as I thought about all the times we had it since that weekend. Did it still feel the same to her? Was she thinking about this night every time we made love? I tried to shake it off so I could continue watching. When I was able to return my attention to the TV, it looked like Jenny was somewhere between pleasure and pain. Megan laid down in front of her. This time Jenny didn't hold back. I didn't have as good a view of what David was doing, but it became obvious. I hit eject on the remote and pulled the tape out of the VCR. I watched, my mind disconnected, as it left my hand and broke into a dozen of pieces against the brick wall next to my fireplace. I threw the pieces into the fire and stormed out of the house, trying to figure out some way that I hadn't just made everything worse. When I picked Danny up the next morning, Sharon seemed concerned. "John, are you okay?" I didn't want to talk about it, so I just told her things were complicated. When she tried to push me about it, I reminded her that what she had said about not wanting to be in the middle of things. She reluctantly let it go. That afternoon, I dropped Danny off with the sitter and reluctantly headed to our session. When I got there, I saw that Jenny had already arrived. As I walked into Brian's office, I heard them talking amiably. They rose to greet me, but Jenny sank back to the couch when she saw my expression. Brian looked at me sadly. "John, is there something wrong?" I tried to be honest. "No, I'm just having a rough day. I think it would be better for us just to get started." The session was a disaster. Brian knew what was wrong, but didn't want to push it. Jenny didn't know, but was uncomfortable with my obvious attitude. I was miserable because I wanted to stand up and scream, but knew it would have made everything worse. There was something else bothering me, but I couldn't deal with it right now, so I shoved it to the back of my mind. At the end of the session, Jenny left. I said goodbye, but stayed to apologize to Brian for being in such a bad mood. He didn't give me the chance. "You watched the tape?" All I could manage was, "Yes." "Was it as bad as you feared?" "Brian, it was worse. I don't know what to do." I tried to stay quiet so I wouldn't say something I'd regret, but I just wanted to tell her how angry I was and how much she had hurt me. I can't believe how she was acting. Brian studied me for a little bit. I had hoped you would let it go, but I can see why the urge to know what happened would be overwhelming. Was David telling the truth? I sighed. That's the worst part, he was. She was drunk, her best friend tricked her, and she was seduced by 3 people working together. But she gave into it and enjoyed herself a lot. I wanted to be outraged at the way they used her, I really did. She said no several times and said she didn't want to let anything happen that would hurt me. Once she gave in, everything changed. I decided I couldn't take any more and smashed the tape. John, the only thing I can advise is that you need to sit down with her and tell her about it. She's going to be humiliated that such a tape exists and hurt that you watched it. You need to be gentle with her because she is very fragile right now. If it takes you a week to be sure you can talk to her without anger, take the time. You'll need to talk about it by yourselves because I don't want her put in a position where she feels like she's being ambushed here. Once you talk about it, I'll help any way I can. Please call me if you need to talk again. I left wondering if everything had finally gotten as bad as it was going to. Saturday I decided it was finally time to talk to her. I was still afraid I might blow up, but at least I calmed down enough to give it a shot. I wasn't sleeping at night with those images in my head, so wanted to get this over. Leaving Danielle with Steve and Sharon again, I went to pick up Jenny. I had called earlier and told her I had something serious to talk to her about. I didn't want to ambush her, but I also didn't want to scare her. I asked if she'd like to go to the park where we often took Danielle. It didn't have a lot of traffic usually, so we should be able to have some privacy. I thought about telling her from the beginning about David and the tape, but decided it was too much. It might be so upsetting for her that we wouldn't be able to talk at all. Considering the mood I was in, I knew there was a very real possibility that this could turn ugly, so I swore to myself I'd be cool. I wanted to settle as much as I could. I couldn't allow myself to be selfish no matter how mad I got. Danielle had improved remarkably in the 2 weeks since I let her start seeing Jenny again. Jenny, I think I'm ready to hear your side of things if you still want to tell me. I know you've been living with this for 7 months and it has to have been hard for you. I can't promise I won't be upset, but I'll try my best to let you explain. I just am asking you to be totally honest. Don't pull any punches. The worst thing right now would be to find out you lied to me about something, okay? She nodded and took a second to collect her thoughts. With a sigh, she began. For the last 2 months before the trip, things weren't working very well between us. I know you tried, I did too, but I was really worried. I was spending more time with Megan and she was saying things that made it worse. I didn't see it at the time, but I think she was trying to upset me on purpose. She never said anything directly against you, but it was enough to feed my insecurities. She would say things about having friends with problems similar to ours who eventually wound up divorced. I would tell her that we wouldn't end up like that, but I think some part of me was afraid. I swear that I kept trying my best to make things better, but it was hard. I was scared that it wasn't going to get better and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. I think I got defensive because every time I tried something, it didn't seem to work. I missed being close to you so much that I let some of her stories get to me. She took a deep breath before continuing. Just before we went to New Orleans, she kept telling me how good it would be for our marriage with us being apart for a few days. She would say I should have fun so I could relax and let things get better naturally when I got back home. We went to the hotel bar Thursday night and danced for hours. After doing some things Friday afternoon with Angie, the bride, we went to a different bar. We met 2 guys there. She stopped talking, beginning to weep softly. I took her hand and asked her to please keep going. We all danced together for about an hour, then Megan and I went to the bathroom. She told me how hot she was for the guys and begged me to help her get them to our room so she could have a 2 of them. She said it would be good for my ego to flirt with another man, especially knowing that I wasn't going to do anything wrong. Because Megan was the one they'd be sleeping with, I wouldn't have to feel guilty. She looked up at me with tears streaking down her face. I was so stupid, I'm sorry. I was a little drunk and didn't think about what could happen. I didn't think about how you'd feel about me flirting, even if it was just to help her. She looked at her hands as she furiously rubbed them together in her lap. We stayed at the club for at least another hour. Megan asked if they'd like a nightcap and they said yes. I thought I was doing something fun for her and planned to leave before things got out of hand. I think I underestimated how drunk I already was. Things that I know I should never have done didn't seem like that big a deal. I just kept thinking about her being able to have a wild night and how much I was looking forward to coming home to you all worked up. Once we got back to the room, they kept giving me drinks and dancing with us. Megan came up with a stupid game that we could play. I can't believe I agreed to it, but I did. Things got out of control right after that and I cheated on you. She looked up at me again. I would give anything to take it back. I love you and never thought I was capable of something like that. I thought I was so safe, that Megan was watching out so that nothing could happen. I never could have imagined letting myself do those things. She stopped her story and began crying harder. I let her get it out, and then pressed her to continue. I wanted to see what lined up with David's version and what I witnessed on the tape. I was shocked that she confessed to everything without blaming anyone but herself. I didn't know if she was trying to take all the responsibility, or if she honestly didn't realize she had been set up by her friend. She left out the sordid details and I didn't ask. She did admit to having it with David, Jake, and Megan. When she finished, I let her have a moment to collect herself. It had to be incredibly difficult to admit those things, and I really felt awkward trying to ask questions. However, there was one big one that had to be addressed. Jenny, if what you're telling me is the truth, why didn't you just come home Saturday? She looked at me with very real pain in her eyes. There were several reasons, but you're not going to like any of them. I know I don't. I understood her discomfort, but I had to know everything, so I asked her to continue. First, I felt terribly guilty for what I had done. I didn't know how to face you and thought a couple of extra days would give me time to prepare myself for how angry you would be. Second, I wasn't physically up to it. If I had traveled home, you would have known immediately that something was wrong. She looked away and I thought I saw a flash of anger. Third, Megan convinced me that Friday was something I caused and that it was proof that our marriage was in trouble. As she wiped away another tear, she refused to look back at me. She said that I started everything by grabbing her hand and moving it under my skirt. Then she said I grabbed one of the guys and began kissing him. That's when everything got out of control. She paused and finally looked me in the eyes. I thought she was my friend and wouldn't lie to me. When I told her what I thought had happened, she said it must have been the alcohol and the blindfold making things seem more intense. She said that they were doing the same thing to me that they had done with her and everything was fine until I got out of control. I felt my jaws clench in anger as I listened to more of Megan's manipulations. Even though it was hard to separate any of this from Jenny's actions, it was obvious that she never had a clue that Megan could treat her like that. Her friend used Jenny's trust to undermine our marriage. I hoped that I could eventually find a way to pay her back. She told me that she got carried away because of the things I did. I should never have believed her, but I felt like it was easy to think that the way I remembered things was just me trying to rationalize my behavior. I would have stayed at the hotel all day so I could try to sort things out, but she begged me to come with her. She said that everyone would know something was going on if I disappeared. She told me the best way to not make anyone suspicious was to act as if nothing had happened. I was so stupid. I began to feel myself losing objectivity. Jenny's pain was so acute that it was unbearable. I couldn't figure out how to console her without making things even more awkward, so I hoped she would take my lack of accusations as support. Saturday night was a different problem entirely. I just don't remember how it got started. When we got there, nobody told me what was going to happen. I had a couple drinks with Megan while Angie opened her presents and the girls laughed and joked. When the man came out and announced the entertainment, I tried to leave but I felt really weird. I sat there for a while trying to get myself together, but I just couldn't. Some of the girls were dancing on the stage away from the strippers and I remember Angie pulling me up with them. The next thing I remember was some woman grabbing me from behind and me telling her to knock it off. I don't know what happened after that, but I suddenly realized I was laying on the stage and Megan was, well, you saw it. When the stripper came up to me, I know I tried to say no, but it's all a blur. I guess I just gave in. I was still sick from the night before, so I only had a couple of drinks, or at least thought it was just a couple. I can't explain it, but that's the truth. If she was telling the truth about not drinking that much, I was willing to bet that Megan had something to do with it. I didn't like her story about not knowing what happened, but there wasn't any reason for her to lie that I could think of, so I accepted it. I already knew most of what happened anyway. I asked her if she remembered what happened right after that, because she disappeared from the video. She appeared very uncomfortable and said she wasn't sure. It was the first time I sensed some evasion from her. I insisted she tell me what she knew. She looked away from me. Do you remember what you said to me the night you made me leave? You said that I wasn't thinking about Danielle when I was being a SL with Megan. I cringed as I heard the words come from her. They sounded harsh and crass, even though I knew what I actually said was even worse. Yes, I remember it. Well, you were wrong. Everything was foggy. It felt almost like a dream and I was really confused. I knew what I was doing, but for some reason it didn't seem real. Then I remembered a conversation with Danielle about a week before the trip. She asked me what the thing was. I raised my eyebrows because this was the first I had heard about it. She heard someone mention it in some movie and asked me what it was. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. We've never really talked about what to say to her. Since you weren't home, I tried to be as vague as possible. I told her that it's something two grown-ups who love each other do together. I said it's very precious and you should only do it with the person you love because you need to love each other for it to be right. For some reason that conversation jumped into my head in the middle of what was happening. I had a vision of her seeing me like that and me trying to explain it. It snapped me out of whatever was going on and I jerked away from the stripper. I remember Megan calling to me and saying to come back, but I just ran out the door without even getting my clothes back on. I found myself standing outside in the rain, trying to get my bra back on, but couldn't because my hands were shaking so badly. When I finally got myself straightened out, I realized people were staring at me. I felt so humiliated, I just ran back to the hotel. When I got there, I took a long shower, then crawled into bed. I just lay there thinking about what I had done and how you'd never be able to forgive me. I cried until I passed out. When Jenny didn't continue right away, I asked if she was okay. I realized that I hadn't really reacted to much of what she said because I already knew what was coming. I kicked myself because I wasn't ready to talk about David and didn't want her to notice anything. After a few moments, she seemed better, so I asked her what happened Sunday. She said the next morning she woke to find the stripper next to her in bed. She didn't know how he got there or if she had it with him, and everything hit her at once. She ran to the bathroom where she threw up, then couldn't stop crying. She backed up David's story about them talking and him telling her not to say anything to me. As she was leaving for the airport, she ran into Megan in the hotel lobby where they had a huge fight. Jenny told her to stay away, that she couldn't believe Megan had let those things happen after promising to watch out for her. Jenny had never had it with a woman before and had no reason to think Megan was telling her anything other than the truth about what was supposed to happen. Although she was angry with her friend, she was feeling more humiliation from her own actions. Megan said that Jenny had wanted to act like that ever since she got married and that she had done my wife a favor. It ended with Jenny storming out to her cab and Megan heading back to the room. Since Jenny took an early flight, she didn't see Megan again before leaving. Since that night, they talked on the phone a couple of times, but hadn't seen each other once. When she finished, I didn't know what to say. I expected evasion. I thought she'd try to shift the blame, maybe a couple of white lies to make herself look better. Hell, after watching the video, I wouldn't have been surprised if she had said she hadn't consented. The one thing I hadn't counted on was her being completely forthcoming, even taking more of the blame than she deserved. It was unnerving. Her story about Saturday was disturbing, but I couldn't detect any dishonesty from her, so I let it go. I let her cry for a long time, longing to comfort her but unable to overcome my own issues. I also wanted to tell her about the tape, but couldn't figure out how to do it without hurting her more. Knowing that David taped her being a complete SL would be awful. Finding out that I watched it would be a lot worse. I didn't see any purpose it would serve, so I decided to keep it to myself. When I finally spoke, I was surprised by the hoarseness of my voice. Thank you for being honest with me, I know it must have been hard. She smiled weakly at my praise. Just looking at her made me want to shake her for doing this to us. I also wanted more than anything to hold her until she stopped crying. Part of me felt horrible that she had to suffer through this. I still loved her so much it hurt. Things were so complicated, I didn't know what to do. I took her home and then went to Steve's house. While waiting for Danny to finish playing, I went outside with him and told him everything, leaving out the specifics. He agreed that I had done the right thing by not telling her. He also remarked about how much better Danielle had seemed over the last couple of weeks. He did that a lot and I knew it was his not-so-subtle way of hinting that I shouldn't shut Jenny out of my life. I agreed that Danny had improved and told him it made things that much harder for me. When we left, I could only hope that time with my daughter could help me get it together. My time with her was the only thing keeping me sane. After that, Jenny and I had 2 weeks of sessions that were much more productive. Every time Jenny would try to apologize or put herself down, Brian would cut her off. He didn't want to hear about blame or either of us being sorry. It didn't address the real problems, which we still had looming in front of us. My daughter had one parent and one step-parent living in different homes. She had no say in what was going on and didn't understand why the adults couldn't work it out. Jenny hadn't done anything but punish herself for weeks. She had neglected her health, her job, and had basically hidden from life since the truth had come out. I might have been the biggest mess of all. My punishment of Jenny caused me guilt, hurt my relationship with her family, devastated my daughter and caused a rift between me and my closest friends. It had gotten better since I relented and let her see Danny again, but there was still awkwardness between me and the people who I had been closest to. The day before our 4th session together, I dropped off Danny with Jenny's mom for the night. I needed to make a decision, and then stick to it. Drawing this out wasn't doing anything but harming all of us. I went to one of the bars we used to like visiting. There was a band playing there that I had been wanting to see for some time. I sat by myself all night, unable to enjoy anything.